Welcome, everyone, to the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority Board meeting. Excited to have everyone on here today. This is a virtual only meeting. Today is Wednesday, April 8th, 2026, and we have a quorum here, and I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Since our last meeting, we continue to have great progress on the site. The site crews are making progress on that critical backbone infrastructure, and the Point team continues to work closely with the Point partners in preparation for vertical construction on the site. So we are very excited about the progress that we're seeing, and it's great. I actually last night was just driving by the site, and it's fun to see all the activity and start to see things not coming out of the ground, but you can kind of see the paths and layout of where things are going. So really exciting, and appreciate all the great work that has gone into getting us to where we are today. We will start our meeting with our public comment, the second item on our agenda. This is something that we do with all of our meetings, as the Point is a public project. We feel strongly as a board that we have a responsibility to ensure that this reflects public values and provides broad public benefits. And so we take input from residents and welcome any public comment following the procedures that are outlined on the posted agenda. So if anyone from the public would like to speak, if you would raise your virtual hand icon on Zoom, we'll go ahead and call on you to make comment. I'm not seeing anyone. You see anyone, Jen? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to the third item on our agenda, which is consideration of the minutes from our March 11th, 2026 board meeting. Thank you to Jen for putting those detailed minutes together. And I'll open it up for any discussion or a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Great. We have that motion from Chair Snow. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second from Mayor Wilson. So the motion before us is to approve the minutes from our March 11th, 2026 board meeting. Any discussion of that motion? Seeing none, I'll place it. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. I'll rule that passes unanimously. All right, that moves us to the fourth item on our short agenda today, and that is, let's see here, the DDA amendment number 2. And we've talked about this a little bit in our last board meeting. The Point team and the Point partners have worked collaboratively to vet several proposed amendments to the disposition and development agreement. We believe that these changes will allow the Point project to move forward with some strong accountability, fairness, and at an increased speed, which is important. So special thanks to our legal counsels out at Parsons, Bailey, and Latimer for their support in preparing these amendments. And if I could invite Lauren Reber, is she on as a panelist?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can see you there. Lauren, we'll give the time to you to introduce this and answer any questions that the board might have on the amendment.
Yeah, sounds good. So the second amendment is, addressing quite a few issues. The biggest one is creating this residential carve-out area for the for-sale housing project parcel, and that removes it from the sub-campus process, which will allow for the sale of the parcel to a third-party developer. And it also removes the 5-year hold period requirement. That's subject to the whole development. So that's a really important piece. And then we're also creating an administrative amendment process, which is a new concept that will allow the executive director, as agreed to by the developer and the land authority, to administratively amend certain provisions of the DDA without going through the formal amendment process. For example, it will be things like parts of the design guidelines or the design review process. So it will make it easier to do those small amendments without going through a full amendment process. it extends certain dates that need to be updated that were part of the original agreement that no longer work. And then it creates or adds the ability for a board to designate approval responsibilities to a designee. It removes Convergence Hall parcel from phase one, and it replaces the current Exhibit H to revise the parcel uses allowed in the priority zone. And then it replaces Exhibit K to change the formatting. There was no numbers or, any way to reference certain parts of Exhibit K, so we've updated it to make that easier. And then it also removes the language associated with the diversity, equity, and inclusion and replaces that with local hiring requirements. So those are the main parts of the amendment. Happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks for that report, Lauren. Are there any questions from members of the committee?
I have some questions, Representative Tusher.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind me jumping in.
Absolutely.
And Mike, since you are with us, perhaps you can address these issues. I think this is a proper amendment, but I do have some questions and maybe a few concerns because I don't understand. But giving the director the ability to change. So I'm looking at paragraph 5 and sub F, which is the design guidelines. So help me understand. And the reason I raise this is I know that when the DDA was negotiated, we spent a tremendous amount of time with Steve and our partners on design guidelines. And so, Mike, are we saying that we're delegating authority to you to make revisions to those guidelines just on your own? Do you understand my question?
Yes, I do. So there's two parts to it, Lowry. There's our design guidelines, and there's also the DRC process. And as we've gone through the design review process, we've certainly had to adapt because of timeframes, because of making sure that everybody is reviewing it in a timely manner. So there's just been minor tweaks along the way that everybody has agreed to, including the developer. And then when it comes to the design line itself, we run into minor scenarios where we invite the fire marshal to the table to review the documents. And the fire marshal saying, well, this doesn't actually work. The setback doesn't work because we don't have a ladder truck that extends that far. So we need to bring that building closer with respect to the setback to the right of way. And those are things that are set in the design guidelines that have to be amended, have to be adapted. So what we needed to do was remove a row of trees because there's 2 rows of trees now. We had to remove one of those rows of trees, bring that building a little bit forward to accommodate the fire marshal. And it's little things like that I don't know that, me coming to the board and saying, hey, for this development to work, we have to remove this row of trees. You guys okay with that? I don't think anybody would object to minor things like that.
It's even more than that. It would actually constitute an amendment of the agreement every single time something like that happened.
Sure. And I get that. What I'm trying to understand, and maybe Lauren can help, is that wide open in terms of this authority? Now, even though, Mike, I understand the example you've given, and I fully support, but what if it's not Mike as director and it's someone who doesn't have your level of sensitivity and says, I never really liked these design guidelines that require some sort of a color palette or a look, something significant. How do we distinguish, or am I making an issue about whether these are minor decisions, or does this, if it's read in a different way, does it give the director the ability to make a major change in the design guidelines. Do you understand? Again, I'm hoping you understand what
I
I'm
do.
saying.
I do. Let me suggest this, Lowry. The intent of this amendum is not to do significant changes. It is to get rid of a little bit of this tedious scenarios that we face, and having to come back to the board to amend the overall DDA for these little amendments. It seems a little over cumbersome, if you will, and
Sure.
the developer has to agree as well. So it's not like the executive director comes in and just scraps the thing and says we're not. I don't like the color. I don't like this. I don't like that. It's a unilateral agreement for one, and then Nick, could you maybe Nick could weigh in a little bit as well. He deals with this quite a bit.
Yeah, the real issue is that it's to expedite processes that are not that don't change policy. They have to do with making the site work because it turns out there's an easement or a gas line or something, and we're just trying to make it work. But we end up having to alter, as Steve knows, on a number of occasions, the design guideline in order to make it work. And technically, we should go through an amendment process of the DDA every single time. And
Right.
the board meets once a month. Now, if you met every week, it'd be different, but you meet once a month. So that adds greater slowness to the process. And so it became apparent that these are in the field kinds of circumstances where we have to tweak that sidewalk a little bit or whatever it may be. And we didn't have a mechanism to do that short of actually doing a development agreement amendment every single time. So.
Sure. And I fully understand and appreciate the effort to streamline, and I support it. I'm just asking, at what point becomes a minor revision or modification and something that is, as you mentioned, uh, Nick, a policy decision. And I fully understand and appreciate, Mike, you would say, and Nick would say, no, we're not going to make any policy revisions. But as this amendment currently stands, it doesn't say that. And so if I'm being too technical, then I'm happy to hear discussion. Thanks.
Thank you,
Chair,
Chair
perhaps
Steele.
I could make a suggestion. This is Steve Kellenberg, and that is that could just a simple phrase be added to the amendment that tries to differentiate between minor changes and schedule revisions versus shifts in the primary character of the project.
That would be my preference. I notice that Chair Tusher that Mayor Wilson has her hand up.
Yep, I was going to call on her right now. Mayor Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you. So this is the same conversation I had with Michael when he reached out to me about in preparation of this meeting today and this issue for consideration. I think that I would likely err on the side of allowing Michael to keep moving. I think that the questions raised are appropriate, and I think I struggle with this every day as I administer, 4,000 employees that report up to me and try and figure out that right balance between what do I need to know as an executive and just the allowance of staff to go and do their job. I think I also, and many of you as well, work directly with business and understand the role of a corporate board over an executive. And the executive actually has a lot of authority in those situations. Yet, the ultimate issue is the performance what a board would like to see. And I think I have a lot of trust in Michael, and I think he knows where that line is. We've talked about it. And he also knows that his employment is, contingent on our approval. So I don't think Michael certainly, but any future executive director is going to get over their skis too much on this point. I think it could happen at that point. I think it's up to the chair and the vice chair and those who may have a little more involvement, even on a weekly basis compared to us on a monthly, to hold the executive director accountable. I do like the idea of the amended clarification on the fundamental nature of the project or something thereabouts to create a little bit of a guardrail. And there might be a reporting update to us, but I think he gives that to us in the executive summary that is provided on a monthly basis. So I see the point. I also have many of Lowry's concerns, but I think given our interest in keeping this project moving, I would rather move forward as recommended, maybe with that modified language. And it's just a message to Michael, like, be very cognizant of anything that leans into a more substantial decision, because we would, in those situations, like to weigh in. So those are my thoughts.
You know what? I didn't even get my phone out. Thank you, Mayor Wilson.
I don't blame you for that.
Further discussion. Questions from the board?
I will text her back. Thank you for everything else.
I'm not seeing any.
Sorry,
Chair-
this is Dawn. Can I speak for just a second?
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
thank you.
No,
No, I appreciate the discussion and the clarity. I appreciate the clarification. In the chat, I did put that I like the proposed amended language. This is to an amendment, so I don't want to confuse the two, but the proposed adjustment to the language by adding a sentence, just a clarifier, I think is a good idea. Because when I look at this project, I look at it holistically as a big project. Right now, we're looking very today. This is what needs to happen now. This is how we're moving things along now. And Michael's the executive director, and we're the Palmsville board. As things continue to move forward and change, I just want to make sure we're putting the right things in place so that if any of us on this call are not in this role, it's still clarity added to this, and that it still makes sense. So I like Steve's proposed language, and I support adding that, just clarification to this amendment.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. Let me share some thoughts I have. I agree that the language in this agreement is fairly wide and sweeping. I don't anticipate that Michael would use that or abuse it in any way. But one way that we might be able to put some guardrails on this that doesn't necessarily hamper us in moving along this amendment is this amendment is between the Point Partners and the Land Authority here. We can have our own internal policies that Michael could draft up that give him the guardrails of when he can exercise this right or not. As we've laid it out as a board, that might be the better place to provide that clarity rather than it being in this agreement, because what you don't want to do is put in some vague language in this agreement that then could be challenged by one of the parties or a third party for some reason of whether or not it met the standard of being substantive or changes the character of the project, those types of things. Whereas as a board, I think we could be a little more specific in that, and we could change it over time and essentially give the leash that we want to give Michael. Whereas the agreement allows him full autonomy to do that, our control of his employment limits when he can exercise that right. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that proposal. Or Lauren, maybe could you jump in really quick and, as you've heard this or seen other agreements, what would you advise us?
Yeah, Jordan, I like the idea of having a separate agreement because, as you stated, the agreement that we're talking about is between, Palmsla and a third party. And so I don't think we need to have as many details of how the board and the executive director will figure out these different lines that they don't want to be crossed. So I think having maybe a separate agreement or separate resolution or something that designates maybe more specifically what the board feels is appropriate to be changed in this way is a good way to do it. I mean, we can add additional language to the amendment, but I am a bit concerned that adding anything that isn't very clear lends itself to a lot of questions, especially if you're dealing with a major versus minor. I think those types of things are what gets litigated, you know. Those are those phrases that get a lot of litigation that come from them. So I do think that we want to be careful what kind of language we put in to decide what's a major versus minor amendment or what's appropriate to be an administrative amendment. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you for that. Michael, do you have any more thoughts on this discussion?
No, I completely agree. I think that's a very good approach.
All right. Well, is there someone that would like to make a motion?
May I
Further
speak?
discussion? Yeah,
Mr.
go ahead.
Chair? I don't know that I'm prepared to make a motion, but I like what Representative Tusher says and Lauren as well. But in terms of, and I'm not trying to be negative here or throw a wrench in streamlining the process, but if you create a separate document, a resolution in writing as an attempt to define those issues, that likewise becomes evidence. If you're really worried about creating litigation, that has as much evidentiary power or effect as it in here, as it would in this document, in my opinion. It doesn't just simply because it's a separate document doesn't mean that if a third party wants to raise an issue and says, I don't like the way that you changed allowing this property to be built in this way or handled this way, that somehow because it's in a separate document, it isn't the source of contradiction. I move that we approve this amendment, but that we include with respect to that paragraph 5 subsection F, that we utilize the language that Steve Kellenberg said that still, in my opinion, leaves a significant amount of discretion to our director to make those changes. But it also doesn't leave it wide open, and I think is more consistent with our duty as a board to still have some integrity towards the design guidelines, where we have put so much into those that we simply don't delegate changes. Not with Mike. I don't have any problem with Mike or Nick. But in the future, after most of us are gone and subsequent directors who doesn't understand their limitations the way they've been outlined here, that we can refer back to this document, or the board can, to protect the integrity of the development. So that's my motion, is that we adopt, that we approve this subject to including Steve Kellenberg's language.
Okay, that motion is in order. If I could just clarify that, Chair Snow, are you limiting that to just subsection F?
For right now, I'm only limiting
5?
to the guidelines. And part of that, by the way, is based on the period of time, and Steve can comment on this, that we spent on design guidelines to make this require the kind of development for phase one that is consistent with the overall vision, a significant amount. And I hate to see that just delegated to one person, whether a decision is made in error or not without these guidelines, or I think Mayor Wilson used the term with this guardrail.
Okay, so to clarify one more time, I didn't quite hear your answer. It is just applying to Exhibit J, the number
just applying to subparagraph F, design guidelines.
Okay.
Paragraph 5.
So that motion is in order. Is there discussion to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Ramsey. I appreciate that.
I think I'd like to hear Michael's sense again, given that's the motion on the table, as well as our counsel's response, given there was another option, which was to move it outside of this actual amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Wilson. We'll go to them. Before we do, if I could just add a comment, because I'd like them to respond to this as well. Again, in my day job, I spend a lot of time drafting similar agreements, large transactional agreements like this, and I'm always very hesitant in having language that is somewhat vague that then could open it up to litigation. Chair Snow's concern that if we had kind of an internal policy of when the director could exercise that right, that would also open us up to litigation. My thought on that would be it could open it up to litigation, but it would be very different litigation, not between the two parties, but that would be maybe more of a means to whether someone violated their employment agreement, but it wouldn't invalidate the actions of the executive director, because that's clear under the agreement that he had the authority to do that. And similar to, if someone had apparent authority to enter into another agreement as the executive director, just because of the position that they hold, they have the ability to do that. Whereas this agreement wouldn't allow for that, other than if it was approved by the board. So maybe if you could speak to that as well, if that is the same risk that we have if we had a separate agreement versus if we clarify in this agreement. So let's go to Lauren first, and then to back to our executive director, Ambre.
I mean, I'm not going to speak to the likelihood of litigation and how that works, because I am not a litigator. But I do tend to agree, Jordan, that I think that what would happen between, the developer and Ponsla under this agreement, if we added the language that's proposed, would be different than if we had a separate agreement just between the board and the executive director to address these issues. And so, yeah, I don't think that they're the same type of issue. I still have a concern that having a kind of major versus minor amendment without further clarity is probably not the direction I would go. But I mean, it does at least provide some kind of guardrail if that's the goal. I just don't know if that's the most clear way to do it between the two parties to the agreement. So.
Thank you, Lauren. Director Ambre.
So, honestly, I don't have too much of an opinion, because I just don't think that the changes that myself and my team would make are significant changes. I feel like Mayor Wilson mentioned, in the executive report, there's always going to be updates. There's going to be updates from TPP on advancements in the development project. I don't think it's the intent at all. And I get where your guys are coming from, that you want to protect it, long term beyond me. But I just don't think that there's a threat at all that we would make. And Steve could say this as well. We're not going to make significant changes. These are technical, administrative changes that really almost have to be done. For example, the ground lease on H5A was delayed because we couldn't plat the ground. right? That has to be done. I mean, so these are things that are not they're not changing the character of the development whatsoever. So I either way you guys want to handle it, whether it's in this amendment, whether it's a second party agreement, that's fine too. It doesn't matter.
Chair Snow, maybe I could ask you, is there a way that we could do something that is maybe a little more objective? Like, for example, what we have in subsection H there, what if you said, anything that changed the design guidelines, you'd have to have approved by the co-chairs before you could do it on a case-by-case basis. That would still allow for expediency without opening it up to kind of a subjective standard of whether or not it changes the character of the site or
not. I like that. And if we could add, I'm fine with that. Let me just say this. Unfortunately, you've got 3 attorneys on this board are speaking right now. So I agree with Lauren and Jordan that, in my opinion, this change will not create litigation for the most part between us and the developer. That's not where the risk is. The risk is when the hotel is built and they suddenly see this thing going up across the street that is outside the scope totally of the design standards. And they say the board, but in this case, essentially the board, because we've delegated this to directors, said we've looked at the process and your director, not Mike, a successor to Mike, totally gave them a waiver on all of these significant design issues. That's where the litigation will come from. And that doesn't matter whether it's in this document or whether it's in a side document. So I really hesitate to make any kind of a legal argument. I'm entirely fine, Representative Tusher, with your suggestion that somehow doesn't leave it wide open. But also, Mike and Nick, I think we can still make sure if it's with co-chair approval. And by the way, if you wanted to even restrict it further to say, well, anyway, I'm fine with any of those. I'm trying to make sure that we don't, not just for Mike, but for future administrations, leave it wide open and create a situation where we waive something significant and then we are sued because it has been waived and it affects their property rights, the waiver. And I'm not talking about, Nick, I'm not talking about getting rid of a line of trees. I'm not talking about moving a water line. I'm not talking about reducing the width significantly. I'm talking about something significant where a director exercises their authority under this and it is significant and it either we're stuck with this at that point. Whatever we have delegated we're saying is okay. So but I'm okay, Jordan, with your Representative Tusher, with your suggestion. I still like some level in this document that makes it clear that this is not for major design issues, but for minor. And then you have a real question with how those are defined. But if you want to say minor issues as contained in a resolution that exists between the board and the director, or a resolution of the board that more clearly defines what's within their prerogative, I'm okay with that as well. So I know my motion is on the table. I'm willing to withdraw it and let the board entertain another motion. And so, in fact, you tell me you all maybe what your preference is. So thanks, Representative Tusher. I'm going to, though, ask that you not call for a vote on my motion until we have further discussion, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Sounds great. We've got Mayor Wilson who'd like to speak. Let's go to Mayor Wilson.
Well, as a non-attorney, I'm appreciating the dialogue. I think I generally understand the issue. Where I land is wanting to give Michael some freedom so we can keep moving, right? But at the same time, I fully relate and would agree that guardrails are a good thing. So I wonder if can we take 4 weeks to have the attorneys take another look at I think I would prefer, and maybe this is a question. I don't know if I prefer the guardrails to be contained within this document or another. I don't know that we would create yet another layer outside of this document with Michael, because isn't that just his employment agreement? I just think having to do this offline seems unnecessary to me. Either we want to create some guardrails in this language and have them stand, and then I guess a question would be, is that useful to the developer so that the developer is getting a message of, hey, don't get too aggressive here because the board's engaged, right? So I think what I'm saying is that hearing the dialogue back and forth, I like the idea of some guardrails. They need to be appropriate, or don't put them in, because all of us are saying the nimbleness on the day-to-day things is a good thing. So I'm wondering if time would help for the attorneys to talk amongst themselves, define that language, have it within this document. And then I guess the question is ultimately, is that one thing we did not discuss is is that a good thing with the developer or not? So to summarize, I think I like the idea of modified language in this agreement, but that modified language should not go too far, because I like the idea of Michael being able to move. I don't like necessarily another agreement because it seems unnecessary, unless it's just a paragraph or two that we amend in Michael's employment contract, because really it's directional. And I think even this public meeting right now is direction to Michael on where that line could be. So I don't know if we have some time. I don't hear language right now that's been proposed. It's fleshed out to the point to find that line that I think I'm still looking for to continue to allow him to move quickly. But those guardrails, and maybe somebody has the language and we could read it again and we could do this today. But if not, I'm wondering if 4 weeks wouldn't answer some of these questions.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. Let's go to Mike first. And could you just respond to what would the impact would be if we waited another 4 weeks?
Yeah, so if we could just remove the section that's concerning the board members and approve the rest of the amendment, that'd be very helpful. There's other things in there that are time sensitive. And then, yes, of course, we can go and craft new language, more detailed language. We've actually tried to originally, but then we kind of circled back. It came full circle, kind of back to this. It's really challenging to define it and then get it just perfect with the developer agreeing to it as well, right? So anyway,
I would just add that if you remove just the design guidelines from at this point, where that one, like Lowry has said, has been set aside, that would work. We can work on that, and these other amendments allow us to keep moving forward. So,
thank you, Nick. Mayor Ramsey. It looks like Senator Stevenson would like to speak, and he hasn't spoken yet. Let's go to Senator Stevenson, and we'll go to Mayor Ramsey.
Thank you very much. I'm used to working in an organization where I make a decision and that becomes law and away we go. Not the Senate, however. We have an objective with all of these land use authorities that we work with, and that is that we have the ability to work very quickly and bypass a lot of the bureaucracy that we get tied up in with a lot of the things we do in the state, in our cities, in our county, and every place else. And I just want to be very careful as we go through this, that we structure things so that we do need the safety that I think we're trying to build into this. We also need to make sure that we don't sacrifice the opportunity to make sure that these things can be rapid and move quickly and get done what we need done in a very quick manner. And so that's my only comment. Just make sure that we don't kind of throw everything under the bus and then drag it on, like we sometimes do in a lot of agencies and so forth. So, end of comment.
Thank you, Senator. Mayor Ramsey.
Well, Senator, thank you for those comments. I agree with you that we want to be able to be swift, and we have an obligation to keep this moving along quickly. And also we have a very public expectation that they're going to start seeing things come out of the ground. So I, in no way, shape or form, supportive of trying to be a roadblock in any way to what needs to happen.
I don't think swift's the right word. I think nimble is the right word. Okay.
Nimble is good. We need to have the flexibility to make sure that we can pivot as needed and make sure we're moving forward. That said, I agree strongly with Co-Chair Snow that we did work so hard on design guidelines, and my perspective is not coming as a legal perspective. It's just coming as a policymaker. I think policy is short-sighted when it's being decided about a specific person. This project will outlive all of us. And of course, our concern isn't with Michael or Nick, but I have been part of organizations that have had new people come in and they see what's in front of them and other people say, but we don't do it that way. It's always been somewhat of a gentleman's agreement that we would do it this way. This is our understanding. This is our tradition. Well, that's not what it says. And if it's not what it says, then I don't care how you've done it in the past. This is the authority that I have. And so that's my only concern. That's the only reason for my talking about this is I just want to make sure that as we write this, that if there's a sentence to include a guardrail, just to add clarity, it's not directed at anyone except long-term, everyone who comes in. There's understanding by every player that that's just how it works. Because all of us on this call know now how it works. We know that. We understand it. It's to go beyond us. And to me, that's good policy, better policy than making a decision right now based on the players we have at the table right now.
Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. Go to Co-Chair Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's in order, Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend my motion to have the board consider.
Go ahead.
My motion amended is that we approve in its entirety this amendment that is before us, with the exception as we delete subparagraph F from the draft, with the idea that we will bring that back. That's consistent with what Mayor Wilson was saying, and also I think consistent with our director was saying, that we bring it back at our next meeting as a separate amendment with language that tries to address the issues on both sides of this discussion. That's my motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and that motion is in order. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. So the motion again before us is that we go ahead and approve the Second Amendment to the DDA, with the exception of striking in paragraph 5, subsection F, the Exhibit J design guidelines line there, and then renumbering, I would guess, G to F and NH to G. Any discussion of that motion? I don't see any further discussion. Chair Snow, or would you like to sum on that? Or
no, I think part of my motion too, and maybe you included, is that we bring this back, that this matter be placed on the agenda next month for consideration of this deletion as it may be amended by then.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. I didn't mention that. So just to restate the motion before I place it here is again to approve the Second Amendment to Disposition and Development Agreement as was presented in our board packet, with the exception of paragraph 5, striking subsection F, Exhibit J, Design Guidelines, renumbering that section. But then that would be added as an agenda item to our next board meeting. And in the meantime, our staff will work with our attorneys and the point partners to come up with a solution or language that could resolve the design guideline section. Is that correct, Chair Snow?
That's consistent with my motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. All right. I'll go ahead and place the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed say no. All right. I'll rule that passes unanimously. Thank you for that great discussion. I think that was helpful and got us to where we need to go. Let me get back to our agenda here. I think the next item is to move into executive session. I just need to.
Just real quick, I want to thank Lauren for all of her work on this. I've been the one working with her, and she's outstanding to work with on this. So I just want to give her a shout out. So.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate all your great work. All right, that moves us to the 5th item on our agenda. We'll consider going into a closed executive session. This would be pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-201, or excuse me, 2051A and D, to discuss a project proposal and or personnel issue. So with that in mind, can I get a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Moved by
Senator Stevenson.
Senator Stevenson. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second from Chair Snow. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, I'll place it. All those in favor of moving into executive session say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Rule that passes unanimously. So we'll move into executive session. There's a link to the board members to be able to move over to that Zoom link. And then we'll come back and close out our meeting once that executive session has closed.